We've all drooled over the new 2020 six-figure car that we just can't afford. And I get it. It's fun to dream, right?
If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands.
But thanks to our friend Depreciation, some of those dreams can actually become a reality today. Whether it's a Porsche, a BMW, a Mercedes, or even a Maserati. These cars really are the pinnacle of luxury and engineering. But hold your horses, because there is a reason why a lot of these cars have depreciated so hard. And it's not just because of their age. So today we're gonna look at some of the most infamous cars that once stickered in the six-figure range. Yes, $100,000 plus. And over the course of their short careers on the pavement, they have totally fallen into affordable territory. And if you're new here, let me steer you to that subscribe button and turn on that notification bell. Otherwise, buckle up and let's go. So first up on this list is probably one of the most obvious choices, and it's from Germany, and it's their flagship with a V12 under the hood. Are you picking up what I'm throwing down? Yeah, we're talking about the E65 7 Series. And this thing, when it was first launched in 2002, was completely state of the art. And it was built on that controversial design language by Chris Bangle, which if you look at the rear of this 7 Series, I call that the Bangle butt. But this was the OG 7 Series that paved the path for today's technology. And check this out, when it was new, it cost $117,000. And this V12 powered 760 Li was the ultimate luxury driving machine, and easily the best executive cruiser available. Now, the issue was that it was the early 2000s, so the 760 Li and the lesser 745i were both plagued with more electrical issues than your buddy's old Android phone. And it's gotten so bad that it's actually pretty hard to find one nowadays that doesn't have a Christmas tree of warning lights on the dash. So that's why you can find them for less than $10,000 today. And if you look really hard, well, or you just sort by lowest price first, you can find worn out examples for as little as $1,000. And that's less than 1% of the original sticker price. Yes, 1% on a $100,000 plus rig. Now, if you're enjoying this video so far, please hit that like button. It costs you nothing, but it really helps us with the YouTube algorithm, and we're shooting for 22,849 likes on this video, because the next car is another European luxury four-door. And this one is literally called the four-door. And I gotta ask you, who doesn't want some Italian flair in their life? With more style than the S-Class, the 7 Series, and the A8L of the same era. Well, the Maserati Quattroporte isn't the best looker out of the box, but it definitely was for a luxury buyer who wanted something to stand out in the crowd. And the 5th generation Quattroporte, built from 2003 to 2012, came with a V8 that, no denying it, had a beautiful exhaust note. And that's probably because it sounds a lot like the Ferrari models that it shared components with. And although it's not Maserati's #1 looker, it has aged extremely well over time. Now, if you were to get a stripper Quattroporte, you'd be looking at spending about $80,000 brand new. But the average American, when they would buy it, well, they would definitely make sure it was well optioned. And on average, that price went well into the six figures for one. And yet still, it was more affordable than a Ferrari 360 at the time, which had 2 less doors, but a V8 that sounded just as good, and an MSRP of roughly $150,000. And so this Maserati was really seen by a lot of people as the perfect option for somebody that wanted a Ferrari but needed those rear doors. And now that you've waited 10 plus years to get your dream Quattroporte, you're in luck, because you can now get one for as little as $8,000. And if you're looking for extremely clean, low mileage examples, you're looking to spend roughly 15 grand. And that's between 15 and 20% of the original price you would have paid. And with depreciation of over $100,000 in the past decade and a half, this really might be an okay bargain, and one that I would use the Ideal Car strategies on, so I could buy it like a pro. Just remember, you want to get a 2007 or later model, because they had the reliable ZF transmission, which was way better than that Ferrari single clutch F1 gearbox. And for our next car, we got to bring it back to Germany. And this car may cost you just peanuts up front to buy today, but it might cost you 6 figures to keep on the road once you buy it. And I'm sure you guys have all seen a Mercedes logo before. and it's a well-known symbol of luxury. And when you see that AMG badge on one, you know that they've gone a step further, because AMG has established itself as the go-to performance brand for enthusiasts and non-enthusiasts alike. Because any snob looking for something fast and flashy looks for an AMG, and for very good reason. And this C215 CL class sold between 2000 and 2006. And just like me, it had it all. Good looks, big brawny engines, and that ballin' design with no B-pillar. And adding all that up, that means that you can look like a total boss driving down the street at over 150 miles per hour, even though I would not recommend that. But you definitely could. And that's because the CL65 got a 6-liter V12 that the madmen over at AMG hooked up with not one, but 2 turbochargers. Because, well, one just wasn't enough. And this power plant put out a ground-shaking 603 horsepower and 738 foot-pounds of torque. And that's the same amount of horsepower as today's E63 wagon and the AMG GTR. And by the way, if you're not following us on Instagram, go check us out at Ideal Media Official, where you can see all the behind the scenes and just all the stuff that we do, you know, when we're not on screen. And so when you compare the performance numbers to the E63 and that AMG GTR, the CL65 was really just 20 years ahead of its time. But to be ahead of your time, it wasn't cheap back in the day. In the early 2000s, the CL65, well, it was about $180,000. And if you were looking at a well-optioned model, you were looking at spending over 200 grand, which if you were to get 2 Quattroportes, you'd have 8 doors instead of just 2. Nowadays, a CL65, believe it or not, can be purchased in the roughly $20,000 range. Now, this is for supposedly sorted ones, and that doesn't take into account at all the air suspension that's guaranteed to go at some point. But you and me both know that it's at least a wee bit tempting for this performance, and you could even make out with the lesser CL55 AMG. But just remember going into this purchase that replacement parts will cost a small fortune, and that $20,000 car can become a $40,000 car without even blinking if you're not careful. Yeah, I better not blink, because this next car is a status symbol for wealthy suburban wives. And yet, somehow, some way, they are ridiculously low as far as the price goes today. Way back in 2003, Porsche launched the Cayenne. And while tons of purists thought it was totally sacrilegious to the brand, selling them was one of actually the best things that Porsche ever could have done, because it put a ton of money in their pockets. And I'm not gonna bore you with a history lesson, but back in the late 90s, Porsche was on the verge of bankruptcy. And the Boxster, believe it or not, was what really got them out of it. And then with the introduction of this SUV, the Cayenne, they made enough money that they weren't facing bankruptcy anymore, and so they could keep building the stuff that they really wanted to, like the Porsche 911 or the 718 GT4 and the GT3 RS. But here's the thing, guys, the Cayenne wasn't all that bad. The original turbo could be optioned to $150,000, and it was a heavy little piggy, weighing in at 5,724 pounds, which is on par with a GMC Yukon. But what was awesome about this rig is that it was fast. The twin turbo V8 put out 450 horsepower, and so this large and in charge Porsche could sprint from 0 to 60 in just 5 seconds. Which, if you think about it, in the early 2000s was insanely quick for the time. Come to think of it, an early 2000s Ferrari 360 Modena went 0 to 60 in 4.6 seconds. So depending on the conditions, especially the rain or the snow, the Cayenne is gonna eat the Ferrari's lunch from a dig. And still, today, they still are relatively quick. And Cayenne turbos are now available in the $10,000 range. And that's actually somewhat of a bargain. Sure, it's less than 10% of the original MSRP, but unlike most of the cars on this list, the Cayenne is surprisingly a reliable choice. And yes, I use the word reliable loosely, but it's not really all that bad. Sure, they have their issues, but who doesn't? I mean, what car doesn't? And yes, I know that Porsche's maintenance costs aren't exactly as cheap as a Toyota's. And in fact, I own 2 Porsches, so I know twice as well. But when you compare to the BMW X5, the Mercedes ML AMG, or even the early Audi Q7 that the Cayenne shared the platform with, you start to think that the Cayenne Turbo is actually pretty affordable to run and maintain. Now, the next car on this list is among the least impressive in the BMW M series. But hey, it's still a BMW, and it used to sell for 10 times what it does today. And word on the street is that BMW M cars have kind of lost their way over time, with their peak performance being roughly 20 years ago, which is actually what my fiance tells me as well. Because nowadays they kind of go for softer rides. Hey.
Ooh, self-burn. Those are rare.
And the M5 and the M6 in the mid 2000s got a naturally aspirated 5-liter V10. And with 500 horsepower and a sprint to 60 in just 4.1 seconds, these things were seriously fast cars. And if you saw one on the road, you knew it meant business. Now, they did have a couple issues with throttle control actuators and rod bearings, and well, let's not even get into that SMG gearbox because that was atrocious. But you could get one with a manual 6-speed as well, and that was the way to go. And although the M6 wasn't a reliable car by any stretch of the imagination, its insane depreciation means that just about anyone can afford one today. Back in 2006, an M6 started a few $100s short of $100 grand, and adding even the basic options like blinker fluid would push it over the mark. Yeah, that really is a thing for BMWs. Now, you guys want to guess how much you can get one for today? How about the $7,000 range to start? And if you're looking for the creme de la creme low mile showroom models, you're looking to spend between 25 and 30 grand. And even still, that's depreciation of 75 to 90% off the original sticker. And talk to any BMW enthusiast and they're gonna be quick to point out that despite the problems, the BMW M6 and its 4-door twin, the M5, are more than manageable if you can wrench on them yourself. But if you're planning to buy one and then take it to the local dealership to get all your maintenance done, you wanna look out because it ain't gonna be cheap. And next up is a British icon of luxury, with repair costs that are pretty much impossible to afford unless you have celebrity levels of cash. The Range Rover has a reputation for royalty. Seriously, Queen Elizabeth drives one, and it's known to be one of the most luxurious SUVs on the road. And not only that, but it's also been the pinnacle of off-road luxury prowess for decades now. And it's easy to see why, because the Range Rover has better ride quality and road manners than the Mercedes G-Wagon. And thanks to depreciation, it's way more accessible. And in just the past couple of years, you've seen a lot of other premium manufacturers build an SUV. For example, the Bentley Bentayga, which I'm still trying to figure out exactly why it looks the way it does. Or you got the Rolls-Royce Cullinan, which is cool, but I'd rather have a Wraith or a Phantom. And buyers of either of those last two choices, they're not taking their rig off-road. And so the mighty Range Rover has held its position as the choice for luxury buyers who still want to venture off the beaten path. Plus, it will make people assume that you have Angelina Jolie levels of money. Yeah, she's driving a Range Rover as well, which could boost your reputation. But remember that the Range Rover also comes with another reputation as one of the least reliable vehicles money can buy at any price range. And whether you're looking at a heavily depreciated sub $10,000 Rover or a brand new Big Daddy autobiography for $150,000 or more, things when they break will straight up bankrupt you. Models from just 10 years ago are now under $10,000, and that's less than 10% of the original MSRP. And this thing has issues on its issues on its issues, like air suspension components that love to leak, complete engine failures. And if you like to be miserable, well then just head over to the Range Rover forums because they will let you know that it is absolute hell to own one. And yes, I'm the first to admit the temptation is so real. And it seems like every year there's a new luxury model that's about a decade old that now is seriously cheap. But as you've learned today, cheap doesn't necessarily mean good. And if you ever look at a vehicle that was on this list, please get a pre-purchase inspection. It'll save you a ton of grief and headaches. And what vehicle or vehicles do you think will drop hard in value in the next couple of years? Drop a comment down below. And also, please hit that like button. And if you're new here, please subscribe, turn on that notification bell. I'm Brad Danger, this is Ideal, and we keep creating Ideal content because of the support from you guys. So thank you so very much and keep living the ideal lifestyle.